magic is found in every room where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah, and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset, and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. I'm Hannah Braderud.
I'm Luke Freeman.
And I'm Chris Province, and today we are talking about navigating ambiguity. I think the journey to performance and the journey of every leader, it is just ripe with ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
We deal with so many situations where we don't have all the answer or we don't have all the information, but we have to go a direction.
Yeah.
Right. So it creates a lot of challenge.
Yeah.
And I think it's why it's so kind of pivotal in developing our emotional intelligence and being able to lead. But navigating ambiguity is ultimately about decision making and establishing direction. So I want our question of the day. I want to ask, what was the last good or bad decision you made? And I want to let you guys pick, was it a good one? Was it a bad one? But let's talk about that.
Man, bringing the hammer today. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to go bad. Last bad decision I made was I put off getting surgery. So as you guys know, I've been having some back problems. And it really started probably 11 months ago. Had a lot of discomfort. And the decision I made was to exhaust all kind of alternative options first. So I cycled through 3 different chiropractors, spent a lot of time stretching, things like that. And eventually, before surgery, I ended up bedridden, and I'm not really exaggerating. I could get up to use the restroom, get up to go to a different room in the house, and then lay down again. And that was really it. I was riding around in the back seat of a car.
Yeah, laying down in the back seat. Yeah.
So that,
taking calls on your back. We were on lots of calls with you.
Yeah. So, I thought with the information that I had, surgery sounded a little scary. It sounded a little extreme. And I was trying to avoid it at all costs, which I think there's some wisdom there. I was hearing stories about people coming back from kind of the symptoms that I was having without surgery. I did research on the effectiveness level of surgery, and it's not a cut and dry thing. It's ambiguous, which I think is why we're having this conversation today. And I chose to wait, but it was super painful and really impacted me emotionally, physically. And surgery, it did the trick. Pretty immediate, pretty dramatic results. And so I'm trying to figure out what my takeaway from that is, what I would do differently. This whole gutting it out thing has worked for me in the past. It didn't work for me in this scenario. So I don't know. I look back and I feel still a little lost on I made some bad calls somewhere in there that could be improved.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, I'm going to go with a good decision that I made recently, and that was to hire a coach. And so I do a fair amount of coaching, and I work as a coach, and we provide coaching as a service. And this wasn't a long time deliberate decision. I hadn't planned on hiring a coach. But there's a woman in my local community who's a triathlete and also a certified life coach. And so she coaches athletes and she coaches business people. And I made this decision without having a lot of information, but it's a little bit of one of those situations when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I got introduced to this woman and I had a conversation with her, and I've been following her on social media for a while. I know who she is, and she's really inspiring. And I have some personal goals, some running goals. I committed to running a full marathon next year. I started my baby journey with running last year, and in season 1, you heard a little bit about that, and now I have a much bigger goal. So I'm going to work with this coach on the running goals, but also on some business goals, because things have been really ambiguous lately, if we hadn't all noticed during a global pandemic. And there's been so much uncertainty, and I felt just confused about a lot of things. I don't have clear direction. And so this woman is a mental endurance coach. So she doesn't coach specifically on how to run or how to meet your goals. It's about, how to basically unclutter your mind and have that mental endurance that you need, whether it's in athletics or in business. And so, when things are really uncertain and ambiguous, don't be afraid to ask for help. You don't have to always gut it out alone. Align yourself with someone that can be in your corner. And so that has been a really positive, it's early on, but already this is a really positive experience for me because of a good decision that I made, and I made it quickly without having a lot of information, but I went with my gut, and it's turned out so far to be a really good decision.
Awesome.
Great.
That's good stuff. I think I'll go with a bad decision, but it's not maybe a specific bad decision. It's the bad decision that I continue to make. But it has the same theme. And I'll go to, like, anytime I go to a restaurant, it comes down to the thing that I know and really like versus the special for that week or that day. And this thing I've always kind of wanted to try, but I don't know a whole lot about it, right? So, I know I love take Cheesecake Factory. They've got 1,400 things on the menu, right? There's always something new to try. But, like, I like the Parmesan chicken. Well, like, man, this chopped salad's really speaking to me. Like, what day am I going to be courageous enough? Like, I'm looking at this chopped salad thinking, that's got positive potential. But the only way I can tap that potential is to have the courage to move away from my Parmesan chicken and into the chopped salad. But then when I order the chopped salad, it's not the Parmesan chicken. So, it's that courage to branch off and try that menu thing that I know nothing about other than it sounds interesting versus something that I really like. So a lot of leadership things there, like status quo versus what's possible. And, sometimes it works out. Usually in those menu situations, it doesn't work in my favor. So that's probably my most common bad decision. But I think it overlays really nicely to leadership and the challenges that we face each day.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because so much of that, I'm thinking about that menu situation. So much of it is like risk mitigation and risk tolerance. And are we okay with moving away from a safe choice to try something that there's a pretty high risk you've identified at this point that it's not going to work out
right
the way you wanted? Right. So when I think about that in a business setting, I think through, like, when we're in ambiguous situations, how are we identifying the risks associated with each potential outcome? And that risk mitigation, risk identification, like, that's some messy stuff. Like, that's fill up a whiteboard stuff. That's have a series of 6-8 meetings stuff. And it's hard work cognitively. It's really challenging. And I see people resisting doing that amount of work.
Yeah. And something that I really adhere to, I've been independent 7 years now. And I would say, like, being independent and growing business is not about innovating. It's about understanding risk. Like, if you hit the iceberg plans and how do you unwind things, and, like, how much resource can you put into something confidently? And, like, it's that continuous assessment that determines a lot about being successful independently. Because you don't want to get yourself in a situation where that one bad decision puts you at risk for your existence. Every year I have the same goal. It's to not go back to a corporation. Like, I love doing the work that we do and being able to engage in multiple environments. We get to work in so many different types of business models, and I never want to lose that. So it's interesting. We are going to have ambiguity. It's going to exist. But when we have the ability to deal with it and navigate those situations, like what are the benefits?
Yeah.
Like what is the benefits to a leader that can get through it?
Yeah. So opportunity, I think. Also like building muscle, if that makes sense. I mean, if we know ambiguity is always on the horizon, like if I'm not in it now, I know it's coming next week. There's going to be some decision that's unclear. Like I have to get comfortable in that space. And, I'm going to contradict myself a little bit and say, we can't have 6 or 8 meetings about every ambiguous situation. We can't mitigate and control every risk.
Right.
And I do see leaders that try and do that. And they do it when maybe the risks don't require that level of planning.
Right.
They still feel like they have to do that level of work and planning anyway. And it completely gums up the works of the organization. I remember back when I was first out of college, worked in an organization with a leader who, my sense of him was that he deeply cared about the people on his team. He deeply cared about the mission and the purpose of the organization. But that care combined with his personality that was very focused on tactics and risk mitigation, like it gummed up the innovation cycle and the ability to evolve for that business. And for years and years, it was hard to do new things there. And I think that's the risk that we run if we don't get comfortable with ambiguity. If we don't just say, on some level, I don't know the outcome.
Right.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And I can live here and I can ask good questions and I can, be on this ride and control the things I can control and let go of the things that I can't control. And most of the time have an acceptable outcome.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's, we're never going to have all the information. If we waited for having all the information, we would never make a decision and we wouldn't be able to move forward. It's about getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, right? And remaining confident even those things are uncertain. And in this environment that we find ourselves right now, as individuals, as leaders, globally, in the context of the world we live in, there's more uncertainty and more ambiguity than ever before, and yet we have to find a way to just remain confident, right? And there are things we can do to help build that confidence, right? It could be hiring a coach. It could be aligning with a partner like Purpose and Performance Group that can help with that objective outside perspective as we make decisions for our business, right? And we have partners like that in our lives, right? The coach needs a coach. The consultant needs a consultant. But whatever the things are, find out what you have to do to be able to remain confident when things are uncertain, to be able to act when you don't have all the information.
Sure. And what we know about there's 2 primary types of clarity that are required. Like for high performance organizations, and if you're going to be a high performance leader, the 2 types are required. 2 types of clarity are required. Like we have to have high purpose clarity, and like meaning like why are we here, and high role clarity. Like what are we doing? And so many times, and especially in like 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation family business that's been really successful, you get a lot of people doing a lot of things, like wearing all the hats. There's no job titles, and like that creates a pretty difficult situation to grow from.
Yeah.
So Luke, I'm interested in like this idea of clarity. Like that's the juxtaposition to ambiguity, right?
Right.
And that's really what we're looking for. So like what's the path to getting clear?
Yeah. Well, I think what you said is spot on. Like purpose clarity, like mission clarity, and role clarity are the things that set people up to be able to perform in ambiguous situations. But they're also, for whatever reason, some areas that people really struggle, as you mentioned. And so if you think about like how the military applies this, right? They know that they have these units going into a combat situation. And the second they leave the base, launch from the carrier or whatever it is, right? There are too many factors to control. Ambiguity is baked into things. And so what they drill on and what they make sure that everyone understands before they leave is, what is our primary objective? What is our purpose with this mission? Like, what are we trying to achieve? And when I know that, if I'm an individual pilot, if I'm a captain of a unit, whatever that is, right? If I understand the purpose, when the shots are being fired, whenever things get crazy, that can guide me in my decision making. And with the role clarity, if I know what my piece of that purpose is, right? How do I relate to the people next to me? I love that you mentioned risk mitigation is like part of your annual goal. Like, how do I make sure that I don't go back to working a 9 to 5 somewhere? That means I have to mitigate risk. Well, I love being on a team with you, Chris, because because I know that about you and know that you look through that lens, I can say my role is innovation and my role is to be creative and bring ideas to the team and ask some different types of questions.
Yeah.
And only because I understand, I think we're all aligned on what our purpose is, where we're going, and only because I understand what our roles are and the strengths that we have and bring to the table, can I really lean into my role and in the midst of ambiguity say, I think what I do today, right now, how I respond to this client, how I spend this hour in focusing on production or writing or whatever, this is the right thing for us right now. It aligns with our purpose and it fits my role for where we're going. And everyone should be outfitted with that.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, just having this conversation right now clarified some ambiguity for me in terms of my role, right? Knowing that you look out for the risks, you bring creativity, innovation. That means I can do my thing where I just start something and I just go. And you got my back. If I'm doing something stupid, you'll let me know. You'll help me make it better. And so together, because we have clarity in our roles and what we bring to this team, even though we may not know exactly what it's going to look like, we'll be able to get there.
You bet. And I think that's when we go into organizational settings, it's always about what are these people strong at? Where do they need to be positioned so that everyone can just do what they're best at every day? And I know internally, we went through role clarity exercises. What do we do today? How do we add value to our customers? How do we add value to one another? Always asking those questions and having that dialogue, it means something. But let's go to the day to day. We're talking about concepts, and a lot of times we sit with leaders and they say, well, what I really like is this and where we need to go is here, and but how do we get clarity, right? And the main takeaway is, what is the ask? What is someone asking me to do? What am I asking someone else to do? And am I garnering their commitment to the thing? Am I giving my leader my commitment to the thing? Am I clarifying that and stating it in explicit terms that here is what I understand my role to be, here is what I'm going to deliver, and here's where I'm going to deliver it by, to avoid those kind of jackpot situations. But let's pull on some thread there. Let's talk about maybe the 5 whys, or how do we ultimately get that clarity?
So, it starts with asking questions, right? That's a theme we keep, it's a recurring theme, whether you're a consultant, a leader, a salesperson, it's asking those clarifying questions. And I know I do this a lot with you, Chris, when we are maybe starting a new client engagement, we have a conversation, and I've known you a long time, so I know that there's certain ways in which you communicate, and sometimes I get this feeling that you're saying something very specific that's important, and I'm not 100% sure what it is. And I know that it's on me to clarify that. And so I will just start like drilling you and say, okay, when you say that, what exactly do you mean? And what does that mean in terms of my role? How are you expecting me to show up in this situation? What skills do I need to bring to the table? Or, in which way can I add the most value to this project? And so looking at, our kind of peer-to-peer relationship, when I sense that there's something that's important for me to capture here, I get really, really like needling with the questions to make sure that I'm not misinterpreting.
They're
the
lasered
intent.
questions, because typically what I'll have is some sort of global history. Like I have the book or the story of performance for the organization, and that may happen over 20 years, 6 months, 60 years, multiple generations. Like they got to where we are today and kind of where we start our engagement some way. And that's a lot of history. I don't know which piece of that you need to know, and like why would we go through the inefficiency of reproducing all of my discovery to you when it's really those specific things. So I am thankful that you then fire the laser questions and say, you know something about the story that should impact my role. I'm going to ask all the questions that get me there.
Yeah, and I think this is a great illustration because it almost highlights what most people don't have. I mean, we do have a lot of trust on our team, and you have known each other for a long time. And I think about someone in a conference room somewhere who is in a similar setting. They're getting an ask given to them, or they're talking through a project that they own a piece of. And their job in navigating ambiguity is to manage whatever it is internally in them that's going to keep them from asking those same questions to get that same clarity. And the sense I get is that oftentimes there isn't the trust, or there isn't the gumption to ask the question, or there's some political balancing that people are doing that leads to keeping things ambiguous that don't necessarily have to stay ambiguous.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's also that ownership. That's the common theme of being a leader. Like, how much do you own? What is your responsibility to continue to ask the questions? And I'm not speaking to senior leader. I'm saying if you view yourself as a leader, you have the right to do exactly as asked and transact some activity. But if you are a leader and you carry that obligation that you can't discharge, then you have the responsibility to ask the question so that your work best contributes to the sustainable value of your organization or your community or your team, whatever the situation may be. We're trying to create sustainable value. And when we just transact work and we're not kind of testing it with that inquiry, then we run at risk of doing work for the sake of work, just doing it for the check. And that's where we get into situations where you look back 20 years later and you're like, I've been transacting a lot. I've done a lot of lifting, but I don't know, like, where is the meaning? And I think through those questions and by really being aware of how we clarify ambiguity, it leads to more meaningful work.
Yeah, that's good. And, we're talking about, I feel like, situations where it's ambiguous, but you can clarify it quite a bit by asking questions. And I think there are a set of scenarios where that is the case. You ask questions, you have the conversation, you do some research, whatever it is, and it clarifies the situation. There are other ambiguous situations that are just ambiguous. And the factors are too great or the conditions are too cloudy that you just don't know where you're going. And I think there's a different technique that comes into navigating that type of ambiguity, which is defaulting to action and getting clear about what you can be clear about. So there's a technique in like outdoor navigation where if it's a blizzard or fog or whatever else that visibility is really limited and you're lost, like you can't say, hey, there's that mountain peak, we're going to walk that direction. Right? Or you can't say, there's the river, we're going to go down there, where's our campsite, whatever. So the technique is you look ahead of you as far as you can see, and it might just be 10 or 15 feet, and you find two objects that you line up. So maybe there's a tree that's 5 feet from you, and then another tree 5 feet behind it. You line those up, right? You walk towards one until you can see the next thing behind it that you can line up, right? And you keep doing that, leapfrogging these items to make sure that in a straight line, you're going somewhere.
Yeah,
Right?
not
Because
in circles.
right, somewhere is better than circles. Somewhere is better than the lost place where you are right now. And I think if we apply that technique, the clarity that we can get is, what's the action item out of this meeting? Who's going to do it? What are our roles on this project?
Yeah.
We don't know if we're doing the right strategy or not. We don't know if we're going in the right direction, but who's going to do what?
Yeah.
When are we going to meet again? How are we going to then find a, if I walk to the edge of a cliff, right, my plan has to change. Yeah, I've been following tree after tree in a straight line, but I can't keep going this way. I'm going to have to reformulate the plan.
Yeah.
Right? But at least I've gone there and done something.
Yeah.
And as teams, we can get that kind of clarity on our strategy and keep moving forward, even in those ambiguous situations.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's really, I love that. Having, always identifying the next step and the next action, right? And we talk about that in sales too, about you're always closing. The ABC of sales is always be closing. You're not trying to close the deal necessarily on the first conversation. You are always closing for the next action to make sure it's very clear. What is the next step? When are we meeting again? What is the next conversation about? Who's involved? Same thing. It's such a helpful framework of identify the next action, and then when you're there, the next one, and you're always moving forward.
Yeah, I also think that leads to a very connected existence, right? When we talk about living in an engaged way. But I want to put a bow on this a little bit. We talked about risk mitigation on our open, like lining up those trees, the tree frog thing, like that is a risk mitigation technique. So we don't wander around in circles. So I can safely go in a direction and safely unwind it.
Right.
Right. If I know how I got there, then I know how to get back to that safe space or to the space where I can reset and pivot or go a different direction.
Yeah.
I also think this is very analog to what we're kind of experiencing right now as part of a pandemic and things that I want to take lessons from as we go forward. And that is like our field of vision, like name any business, like our field of vision has been reduced greatly. Like just uncertainty, right? Economic uncertainty, health uncertainty. Like we don't know a whole lot about what's to come, but understanding like every cloud runs out of rain, but I need to be going somewhere because when this storm runs out of rain, there's going to be things happening on the other side of it that we have to be prepared for. And if we're not moving right now or we're wandering around in a circle, we're not ready. We're not ready to be our high performance selves, our high performance organization on the other side of this. So I thought that the tree frog technique really aligned well with like risk mitigation, the concept of unwind, and accepting what clarity we do know. Yeah. And getting uncomfortable with getting comfortable with what we don't know.
Right.
And getting down the path. Great stuff. I just thinking about this, ambiguity is not going to end.
Right.
So what I'd like to close as far as takeaways is, what are the things that you look at and say, here's what I've learned over the last year, and here's what I'm going to do differently. Here's what I'm going to apply to better navigate ambiguity as we go forward.
That's a great question. So much of those choices when you're in that fog of ambiguity it's hard to know, which strategy is going to lead to success. And so I think the thing that I've learned this year is, what does my gut say? That's kind of part of it. But the other part is, what do I want to do?
Yeah.
Like, what's just going to be more enjoyable?
Yeah.
I mean, on any given day, I could get up and do one of 1,000 things. And which of those 1,000 things is going to bring fulfillment, it aligns with my purpose, helps me contribute as much as I can, And that's me as an individual, but I think that applies to teams too. Like, I don't think it's wrong to sit down and say, listen, we've done some work and we have these 3 different strategies that we could take. All of them are going to be work. All of them lead to unknowns. Like, which one's the most fun?
Yeah.
Team, like, what do you guys want to do?
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And in this world of limitless possibilities that we live in, like, we as leaders should be willing to crack that door into like just what's going to be enjoyable for the people that we work alongside every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, the takeaway is gaining some level of mental clarity, right? Because when you're in that, I like that word fog, that's how it feels, right? Of ambiguity. And there's been a lot of that. And, you know, a confused mind and even a fatigued mind is not going to make good decisions, is not going to produce clear outcomes. And so for me, taking the step to aligning myself with someone that helps me gain some focus and some clarity on, first of all, what are the goals, right? And that, that's both a gut thing and a fun thing, but, you know, what are the things that are going to get me from A to B most effectively? That just helps me clarify, and I get more clear on what I don't know, and, you know, where do I want to go, and what are the steps I need to take to get there.
Yeah, in my takeaway, you know, from just kind of this year is when everything's moving right, you know, I think we come to find out we see a lot of situations where maybe we can stumble around in the fog a little bit and still find success.
Yeah.
And, you know, those rules have changed. And because of that condition, like not being able to stumble around, like it's creating a lot of pressure. Like a lot of situations seem more combustible, like where there's a spark, all of a sudden there's a fire because there's always fuel.
Yeah.
But it's the idea that being comfortable, being uncomfortable, getting what clarity I can, and getting disciplined, right? I think being disciplined about approach, how we show up, and, you know, how we help our client partners show up. I think that's what pays the dividends on the other side, even though it is so ambiguous right now. Because the purpose never changes. Like our purpose has not changed. The reason why our client partners exist, like that has not changed. Only the environment we operate in has changed. And I think we've really done a nice job of navigating the new conditions to move at the speed of the problem, which I think is always the goal. So thank you guys so much for digging into this one. I know it's again, like you don't want to live in that fog, right? So let's clarify our ask. Let's navigate with what visibility we do have, using, you know, what methods we have at our disposal, and, you know, hope that the folks that listen found some value in what we talked about. If not, we'll do better next time. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. Luke, you mind telling everybody like where they can learn more about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you enjoyed this, or if you just have questions, you can reach out to us, purposeandperformancegroup.com or LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever else. We do coaching. We have some amazing coaches on our team. If you feel like you're stuck in the fog, we would love to talk to you. And so reach out, and we will see you next time.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Hey, if you like what you just heard, there's a lot more on our website. Also, please subscribe, and you'll get notifications about every podcast episode and video that comes out.